Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter everything you thought you knew about those fragile little primates from Sol 3. I was there. I witnessed it with my own optical receptors, and trust me, when you hear what happened in that gymnasium on station Kepler 9, you'll understand why half the galaxy now walks on eggshells around humans. This isn't just another story about human strength or resilience. No, this is about the day a human female decided to casually violate every known law of physics, biology, and common sense, just to prove a point. So buckle up, because reality is about to get weird. Professor Thrinix was what you'd call a traditionalist. 8 feet of pure Crevalian muscle, scales that could deflect plasma rounds, and an ego the size of a small moon. He'd been teaching advanced biomechanics at the Interstellar Academy for 47 cycles, and in all that time not once had anyone questioned his methods. Not once, until her. The human transfer student sat in the 3rd row, arms crossed, looking utterly unimpressed. Her name was Victoria Reeves, though she insisted everyone call her Vic. She was short by Crevalian standards, barely 5.5 feet, with auburn hair tied back in what humans call a ponytail. Her species had only joined the galactic community 6 months prior, and already they were causing problems. Asking questions, challenging assumptions, eating foods that would kill most species, being generally irritating. As I was saying, Thrinix continued, his voice booming across the lecture hall, the fundamental principle of strength to mass ratio is universal. Larger species possess greater physical capacity. This is not opinion. This is scientific fact, verified across 10,000 worlds. Vic's hand shot up. Thrinix's inner eyelids flickered with annoyance. Yes, Miss Reeves. That's completely wrong, she said, matter-of-factly. The lecture hall went silent. 63 students from 22 different species held their breath. You simply didn't tell Professor Thrinix he was wrong. Not unless you had a death wish or were spectacularly stupid. Possibly both. I beg your pardon? Thrinix's voice dropped several octaves. A warning sign among Crevalians. Vic shrugged. Pound for pound. Smaller species often demonstrate superior strength ratios. Ants can carry 50 times their body weight. Beetles can pull over 1,000 times their own mass. Even on Earth, some of our smallest creatures outperform larger ones in relative strength metrics. Thrinix's scales rippled, turning a darker shade of crimson. Miss Reeves, we are not discussing insects. We are discussing sentient species capable of higher reasoning and complex tool use. Right, Vic said, leaning back in her chair. So you're moving the goalposts. Got it. A few nervous chittering sounds came from the Quellen students in the back row. Even they, with their limited understanding of human social cues, recognized that Vic had just committed academic suicide. Thrinix descended from his platform, each footfall echoing like thunder. He stopped directly in front of Vic's desk, towering over her. Perhaps, Miss Reeves, you would care to provide a practical demonstration of your theory. Since you seem so confident in your species' supposed superiority. Kai never said we were superior, Vic replied calmly. I said your premise was flawed. There's a difference. Then demonstrate. Thrinix gestured toward the gymnasium doors at the far end of the lecture hall. We have equipment, weight systems, measurement devices. Show us how a human, with your fragile bone structure and pitiful muscle density, can somehow outperform species that evolved for strength. Vic stood up, gathering her data pad. Sure. Why not? I could use the exercise. What followed was the longest walk in academic history. 63 students filed into the gymnasium, whispering, speculating, placing bets. The Quillan contingent was giving 3-to-1 odds that Vic would injure herself within the first 5 minutes. The Torvalians, more pragmatic, were betting on how long it would take her to back down and apologize. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was betting on Vic. The gymnasium was massive, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Crevalian students typically used it for combat training and strength conditioning. The equipment ranged from simple free weights to complex resistance machines that could challenge even the most muscular species. Threnix gestured toward a bench press station. We'll start simple, standard strength assessment. Lift what you can. Vic examined the setup, then looked at Threnix with raised eyebrows. What's the Crevalian student record? 430 kilograms, Threnix said proudly, set by one of my best pupils 3 cycles ago. Okay. Vic rolled her shoulders, warming up. And what do you want me to lift? Whatever you're capable of, Miss Reeves. I wouldn't want you to hurt yourself attempting something beyond your biological limitations. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Vic walked over to the weight racks, studying them. She loaded plates onto the bar, casual as you please, 50 kilograms, then 70, then 90. The students began murmuring. That was already impressive for a human her size, assuming she could actually lift it. She kept adding weight. 120, 150, 180. Miss Reeves, Threnix said, his voice carrying a note of concern now. I must insist you stop. That amount of weight could cause severe injury to someone of your build. Thanks for the concern, Prof. Vic added, another plate. But I'm just getting warmed up. 230 kilograms now sat on the bar. Several students had pulled out recording devices. This was either going to be the most spectacular failure in academy history, or something worth documenting. Vic lay down on the bench, positioning herself under the bar. She took 3 deep breaths, steady and controlled. Her hands gripped the bar, and without any apparent strain she lifted it clear of the rack, down to her chest, up, down, up. 5 perfect repetitions. The gymnasium erupted in shocked chatter. Threnix's scales had gone pale. That's not possible. Your bone density, your muscle fiber composition, the leverage disadvantage of your limb proportions. Yeah, Vic said, racking the weight. Physics is weird like that. She stood up, brushing chalk dust from her hands. You wanted a demonstration, right? That was just the warm-up. What are you proposing? Threnix asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vic's smile was absolutely terrifying, not because it was aggressive or cruel, but because it was genuinely excited, like a child about to show off their favorite toy. You said larger species possess greater physical capacity, she said. So let's test that. Who's the biggest, strongest student in this class? All eyes turned to Gornax. Gornax was a Vrelian, a species that made Crevalians look positively petite. 9 feet tall, covered in armored plates, with muscles that could bend duralloy bars. He was the Academy's wrestling champion, undefeated in 3 seasons. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where the local predators could crush stone with their jaws. And Vic wanted to lift him. Absolutely not, Threnix said immediately. That's over 300 kilograms of living, moving mass. The liability alone. I'll sign a waiver, Vic said. Come on, Professor. You challenged me. You wanted proof. Well, here's your chance to see exactly what a human can do. Gornax stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over half the gymnasium floor. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, each word carefully enunciated in his species' characteristic slow cadence. I will participate, but I will not hold the human responsible if injury occurs. Appreciate that, big guy, Vic said, circling him like a predator sizing up prey. Except, the prey was 3 times her size and could probably bench press a shuttle. Professor Threnix looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. His scales had gone through 7 different color variations in the past 3 minutes, which I'm pretty sure was some kind of Crevalian record for emotional distress. Miss Reeves, I must formally protest this demonstration. The safety protocols alone require at least 4 supervisors and medical personnel on standby. So call them, Vic said, not taking her eyes off Gornax. I'll wait. 20 minutes later, the gymnasium had transformed into something resembling a circus. Medical staff lined the walls, emergency equipment at the ready. 3 additional professors had arrived, including Dean Salthara, who looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Students from other classes had somehow heard about the spectacle and were crowding the observation windows. The betting pool had grown exponentially. Current odds, 15 to 1 against Vic successfully lifting Gornax, 20 to 1 against her doing it without mechanical assistance, and one brave Torvalian had put down 50 credits at 100 to 1 odds that she'd lift him above her head. That Torvalian was either incredibly stupid or knew something nobody else did. Final chance to reconsider, Thrinix said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. He'd seen Vic bench press more than most Crevalian females. Something was very wrong with his understanding of human biology, and he was starting to realize it. Nope, Vic said cheerfully. She stretched her legs, did a few practice squats, then looked up at Gornax. Okay, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to get into position. You're going to hold very still, and then I'm going to lift you. Try not to squirm. It throws off the balance. Gornax's facial plates shifted in what might have been amusement. I have been lifted before, during training exercises. It requires hydraulic equipment and 3 spotters. Yeah, well, I'm not hydraulic equipment, Vic said. She positioned herself in front of him, studying angles and leverage points like an engineer examining a complex problem. I'm better. What happened next would be analyzed, debated and argued about in academic circles for the next decade. Some claimed Vic used some kind of hidden mechanical enhancement. Others suggested she'd somehow tapped into quantum manipulation fields. A few conspiracy theorists insisted she was actually an advanced android disguised as a human. The truth was simultaneously simpler and more terrifying than any of those explanations. Vic crouched down, getting her arms around Gornax's midsection. Her stance was perfect, weight distributed across her legs, core engaged, back straight. Every movement was precise, calculated, efficient. This wasn't random human luck, or adrenaline-fueled desperation. This was technique refined through years of training. On 3, she said. 1, 2. She didn't wait for 3. In one smooth, explosive motion, Vic lifted 317 kilograms of armored Vrelian warrior completely off the ground. Not just an inch or two. No, she lifted him to her chest height, held him there for a solid 3 seconds, then set him down gently, like he was made of fragile glass. The gymnasium went silent. Absolutely, completely silent. 63 students, 8 faculty members and 4 medical personnel stood frozen, their brains trying desperately to process what their eyes had just witnessed. Then chaos erupted. Shouting, cheering, horrified exclamations in 17 different languages. Several students fainted. One Quellan actually molted from sheer shock, which I didn't even know was physiologically possible. Vic straightened up, breathing a bit harder, but otherwise looking fine. She rolled her shoulders, cracked her knuckles, and turned to Professor Thrinix, with the most infuriating smile I've ever seen. So about that strength-to-mass ratio being universal. Thrinix's scales had gone completely translucent, a Crevalian stress response usually only seen during near-death experiences. His mouth opened and closed several times, producing no sound whatsoever. The great Professor Thrinix, terror of first-year students and published author of 12 textbooks, had been rendered completely speechless. Dean Salsalar recovered first. She was a Meridian, a species known for their analytical minds and political savvy. Miss Reeves, she said carefully, I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about human physiological capabilities and why this information was not included in your species' initial introduction to the galactic community. Oh, that, Vic said, grabbing a towel and wiping sweat from her forehead. Yeah, our diplomatic corps probably should have mentioned it. But honestly, we thought you guys already knew. I mean, you've got all this advanced technology and thousands of years of interstellar civilization. We just assumed you'd done your homework on Earth biology before inviting us to join. Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, Salthara said, her tentacles twitching with agitation. We knew you came from a high-stress environment. We did not know that stress environment had produced apex predators masquerading as a sociable species. Apex predators? Vic laughed. A genuine delighted sound. Dean, we're not even the strongest species on our planet. I'm a lightweight compared to some humans. There's this guy from Kazakhstan, who can deadlift over 500 kilograms. Another woman from Iceland who competes in strongman competitions for fun. And that's just normal humans, not even counting military personnel with specialized training. This information was not helping anyone's stress levels. I watched Professor Threnix sit down heavily on a weight bench, his scales cycling through colors I'd never seen before. Gornik stood very still, his facial plates frozen in an expression of what I can only describe as existential crisis. The other students were backing away from Vic, suddenly very aware that the small, friendly human who'd been sitting next to them for 3 weeks was apparently capable of using them as improvised projectiles. Furthermore, Vic continued, because apparently she'd decided today was the day to completely destroy everyone's worldview. Humans have this fun thing called adrenaline. It's a stress hormone. When we're scared or angry or protecting someone, our bodies dump this chemical into our bloodstream and we get temporary boosts to strength, speed and pain tolerance. The lift I just did, that was me being calm and controlled. You should see what we're capable of when we're actually trying. Please stop talking, Threnix whispered. I'm begging you. But Vic was on a roll now. Oh, and the best part? We're persistence hunters. We might not be the fastest or the strongest in a sprint, but we can keep going basically forever. Our ancestors used to chase prey animals for days until the prey literally died from exhaustion. We're essentially the galaxy's most terrifying endurance machines wrapped in soft, squishy packaging. Dean Salathara's tentacles had gone completely rigid. I need to contact the Galactic Council immediately. This changes everything. Trade negotiations, military assessments, colony placement protocols. She trailed off, muttering to herself in her native language. Vic finally seemed to notice the growing panic she'd caused. Look, it's not that big a deal. We're friendly. We don't go around randomly attacking people. We just happen to come from a planet that's been trying to kill us for the past 1,000,000 years, so we adapted accordingly. That's normal evolution, right? No, said Threnix flatly. That is not normal. That is horrifying. Your planet should have killed your species 100 times over. The fact that you not only survived but thrived and then somehow developed advanced technology is a statistical impossibility. Yeah, we get that a lot, Vic said. She checked her data pad, completely oblivious to the psychological damage she'd inflicted on everyone present. Anyway, I have advanced quantum mechanics in 20 minutes. Are we done here? Done? Done. The entire foundation of galactic understanding about strength, evolution and biological limits had just been shattered, and she wanted to know if we were done. Professor Threnix stood up slowly, his scales finally settling into a dull grey color that suggested resignation. Yes, Miss Reeves, we're done. You've made your point, thoroughly. Perhaps too thoroughly. Cool. Vic grabbed her bag and headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Professor, your textbook chapter on universal strength ratios, you might want to add a footnote about exceptions. Just saying. She gave a little wave and walked out, leaving behind a gymnasium full of traumatized students and faculty members who would never look at humans the same way again. That Torvalian who'd bet 100 to 1 odds, he collected 17,000 credits that day. Smart guy. Apparently he'd grown up on a trading station that had regular human visitors. He'd seen them play something called basketball, watched them casually move cargo containers that required forklifts for other species, observed them opening sealed doors with their bare hands when the electronic locks malfunctioned. He knew, and the rest of us, well, we learned. The galaxy learned something that day too. Those fragile-looking primites from Sol 3. They're not fragile, not even close. They're compact bundles of ridiculous strength, impossible endurance, and cheerful disregard for what every other species considers physically possible. And Victoria Reeves, that 5.5-foot human who lifted a Vrelian warrior just to prove a point. She graduated top of her class 2 cycles later. Last I heard, she's working as a structural engineer on deep space construction projects, casually moving equipment that's supposed to require heavy machinery, because of course she is. The moral of this story, never, ever assume you understand humans. And if a human offers to demonstrate something physical, maybe just take their word for it. Trust me, your sanity will thank you.